Hey everyone, SunTide here, and I think that I've become a greatsword fan. So yeah, in this video we're going to be talking about the best greatsword builds as found by a Python set builder, set finder, search brute force algorithm that I wrote when I was bored. So yeah, let's get to it. In other build videos, I've spoken about like how you actually play the weapon and how there's a few different ways you can play the weapon and whatever else. With regards to the greatsword, there is one way that's way stronger than every other way, and it is one move. To play greatsword optimally, you just spam one move, and that move is really, really strong. Basically, if you're trying to optimize sets for the greatsword, you're really just optimizing sets for this one specific, really, really good move. So rather than this being greatsword sets, it's basically really just Strongarm stance builds. I'll talk about other builds later on, but yeah, basically if you don't know, Strongarm stance is a silkbind attack, which is really, really easy to use. Basically, when you're charging attack, you just press the left trigger and you do this counter attack. If you do this right and you counter a move, let's wait for this next move. I'm going to get in his face, charge, block, and then my sword is yellow, I let go, and I do 7,500 damage, which is quite nice. So yeah, it is really, really good. Let's do it again, super easy. Block, counter, and let's do that again. And this time I do, 8,416 damage. So yeah, greatsword is really, really strong, and that is basically all you need to do with it. It's super, super easy. And that's how you play greatsword. Okay, it's not really. There is one more thing you can do, which is you can place a barrel bomb and trigger the counter yourself and do damage that way. So yeah, greatsword. That's how you play greatsword. You just counter and then do that, and you win. You do lots of damage. It's surprisingly fun. There are other things you can do, but yeah. Basically, because this move is so strong, we are really just optimizing for this one attack. And this one attack has a lot of quirks that make set building quite different to every other weapon. So with every other weapon, we are going to use the normal offensive skills, things like attack boost, critical eye, weakness exploit, critical boost. But there are other things. The skill Frostcraft is really, really good, just because we're going to be shifting a lot to like reposition to counter. So Frostcraft is up to 30% extra damage after you fully sheath at level 3, and 30% is a lot. We also like Wirebug Whisper and Frenzied Bloodlust, just because this is a Silkbind attack, which means we're using our Wirebugs, which means having extra Wirebugs is always nice. Frenzied Bloodlust isn't too necessary, and it's a bit contradictory with respect to Frostcraft, but I think it's just a really nice quality of life skill, and it comes with actual Bloodlust, which is a nice damage boost. So yeah, I would recommend just 1 point of Frenzied Bloodlust for comfort. Other cool things. So Offensive Guard. Basically, Offensive Guard is a massive damage boost for a few seconds after you block an attack. The Strongarm stance counts as a block, so this means that your counterattack does a bonus 15% damage, which is massive. That's great. Resentment is also great. So Resentment is the skill that boosts your damage when you have red recoverable health, which I do right now. You take some damage through the Strongarm stance counter, which means that you can actually use that to activate Resentment during this one attack. This can be a bit difficult. As you can see with Armour, barrel bombs aren't going to be doing too much damage, so you might not activate Resentment fully. If you're fighting a monster that inflicts blood on you, you're going to heal when you attack, which might heal you out of Resentment range. So it's not super reliable, but I think it might be the best weapon to actually use Resentment on. Hellfire Cloak is an interesting skill. So Hellfire Cloak is one of the skills you get from Magna Malo. Basically what happens is when it's at level 3, when a monster is enraged, you'll get this fiery purple aura around you, which is different to the Bloodlust aura. But so when you have this aura, you can do a Wirebug Dash, which will leave behind an explosion, and that explosion can knock down monsters. The first time we'll always knock down the monsters, you'll need a few more to get further knockdowns. But when the monster is knocked down, you can place a barrel bomb and do Strongarm stance into True Charge Slash on its head, and do like 4,000, 5,000 damage on it that way. So basically, 3 points of Hellfire Cloak is a free 4,000, 5,000 damage at least once per hunt, which is really worth it for 3 skills. What else is useful? Maximum Might is really, really nice. Basically, what Maximum Might does is when you're at full stamina, for a long enough time, you get a lot of affinity. Basically, Strongarm stance is so slow that even if you start the attack with low stamina, by the time the attack actually happens, Maximize should reactivate, and you'll get bonus affinity from the skill. You can see that on the top left of the screen by the sword with a red aura around it in the status bar. And yeah, so because of that, Maximize is really, really reliable with the Strongarm stance. Powder Mantle is also nice. So Powder Mantle at level 3 charges in 3 hits with the greatsword. It creates this orange aura, which eventually becomes a blue aura after enough time. And if you attack the enemy with a blue aura, you'll deal like 700 or so damage. So I have this orange aura right now. In 20 seconds or so, I'll attack the enemy. Yeah, there we go. And yeah, so that was an extra like 700 damage or so, which is nice. It's going to happen multiple times in a hunt, so it's just a nice damage boost. The last interesting skill is Guard Up. So what Guard Up does is it lets you block otherwise unblockable attacks, like sleep attacks or some particular novas. It's nice just because it means that you can block those attacks using Strongarm stance, which means more chances of a Strongarm stance. I wouldn't use it in every hunt, but if you're going to fight something like Somnacanth, it's a nice skill to slot in. You aren't going to be losing too much damage. Which skills aren't we going to be using? Which skills are less good for this? So a lot of greatsword builds are going to recommend Focus, just because it'll make you charge your really strong attacks faster, like a True Charge Slash, but you don't actually charge it normally by using Strongarm stance. You just skip to the last charge level, which means Focus isn't going to be very useful. Unlike other weapons, we're also not going to care too much about sharpness. We're going to be doing very few attacks, but very strong attacks, so we don't need as much sharpness as other weapons, which means having 3 points of Master's Touch is going to be overkill. It's usually better to just put in a few extra points of Handicraft if we really need a few more points of sharpness. So, yeah. Other notes before we get to the actual builds. These builds are going to recommend using an attack boost 3 decoration with 3 2 slots, which you can get from Curious Melding Cyclists. Feel free to rearrange the actual Curious augments I recommend on the armor. When you do get them, try and get them through normal Curious crafting, just to avoid losing too much defense. And finally, damage is calculated for the average of your first 30 hits without sharpening, 20 hits if you have Heaven Sent. So, yeah, today we're going to be talking about first the two best greatsword Strongarm stance builds, because I think there are 2 that are worth discussing. And then we'll talk about the element greatswords and how and why and when to use them. So the general use best greatsword, the one I'm using now, and the one I showed at the showcase at the beginning of this video, is the Roilcloud sword, which is the Amatsu greatsword. And what makes this greatsword so good is it has a secret effect that increases the damage of Silkbind attacks by 10%. This works for all Amatsu weapons. And you guessed it, Strongarm stance counts for this skill, which means this weapon, just for the sake of it, increases the damage that you do by 10%, which is massive. This makes up for Roilcloud just in general having rather mediocre stats. Like, it has a really bad affinity, it has no slots, it has like a really bad element, and it doesn't have status, so it can't use skills like Build Up Boost, but it just gets 10% damage when you use your Strongarm stance, and that makes it so good. So yeah, you can see the build I'm using on screen right now. And yeah, it's optimal against basically every enemy. That average damage number on screen, that's just a number I use to compare to other weapons. This build does have a few different options. So the main thing is this build has 1 point of resentment, which it gets from a 2-slot decoration. And it has 2 slots it uses for water attack, which isn't going to be making a huge difference. Feel free to change that for other skills, depending on what you want. So if you cart, put on Fortify, it's going to be a way bigger damage boost than Resentment. If you need Guard Up, because it's something like a Somnacanth, use Guard Up. If you want more sharpness, try and fit Handicraft in. You might need to get an extra slot somewhere else, just because you don't have any more 3 slots. You can rearrange things around to try and get, say, for example, Stun Resistance +3 if you want that, or some other 1-slot skills. So yeah, you have a lot of options. And yeah, this build is so good and does so much damage. We saw at the beginning I was doing like 6,000 damage to this guy. So yeah, use this build. This is going to be the general use best build. Sort of. Because there is one other greatsword that's really good, and that is the Sleep greatsword. the Nightmare Frilled Blade Plus, which you get from Somnacanth. I was foreshadowing the whole time. Yeah, so the Nightmare Greatsword, not Soul Edge, not that Greatsword, another Nightmare Greatsword, loses significant amounts of damage per hit. So it actually has around 12% less damage than Roilcloud, which is a lot. 12% less damage is a lot. The thing is, though, that a single sleep can do a lot of damage. If you wake up a monster with an attack, you do double damage on that wake up attack. And remember, in this build, you're doing like 4,000 or so damage per hit. You double that, you're doing 8,000 damage and a wake up attack. And that extra 8,000 damage is about 12% of the damage you need to do to defeat a monster, which means a single sleep can very well make up for the damage loss. It does depend on the monster's health and whatever else. So yeah, a lot of the weaker monsters, when you fight them via anomaly quests, are going to have around 50,000. If you fight a stronger monster, it's going to be more than that. If you fight a weaker monster, it's going to be less than that. So this is going to be really, really good on weaker monsters, less good on stronger monsters. But if you get more sleeps, it'll be doing more damage. And yeah, you can see the build on screen right now. It has all of the same really, really good skills, Hellfire Cloak, damage skills, whatever else. We aren't going to be using Resentment here, just because you aren't going to be activating Resentment when the monster's asleep, which is when you'll be doing a lot of damage. It's also a lot hard to customize in the water build. Basically, you do need every skill, so you might need to sacrifice a lot more damage if you want to use something like Fortify if you can't. I think the best thing to do optimally is to change your augments to get more affinity or something, and then drop a point of maximum might, but you can't really do that during a hunt. So yeah, you also don't have any one slot, so you can put in something like stun resistance. So yeah, much less modifiable, but does do more damage to a monster, is able to be put asleep a few times. So yeah, basically these two options are arguably both equally good as one another, or they're better in different situations. Sleep is good because, on average, if you look through the math and the calculations, Sleep Greatsword will do 1 to 3 sleeps per hunt, which is like 8,000 to 24,000 damage per hunt, which will outdamage the difference you get from using the Water Greatsword. And it's also particularly good if you can't reliably get the Strongarm counters. Having a few that are just guaranteed is going to be massively boosting your damage. On the other hand, though, if you go into a hunt with allies or buddies or sleep toads, you use sleep toads, you're going to put the monster to sleep enough times. You might reach a threshold that your Sleep Greatsword isn't actually going to put the monster to sleep any more times than you would normally. If that's the case, there's no point having Sleep Greatsword if you aren't going to put the monster to sleep more times. If you're speedrunning, you might not even need the sleep because you'll be countering all the time, and you don't want to deal with the animation of them falling asleep, so that could be annoying too. And also sleep messes with things like Hellfire Cloak or Powder Mantle, so you do lose some damage from that. So yeah, there are reasons to use sleep, there are reasons to use water. I will let you decide which one you like more. Alternatively, you can use both. You can start off with sleep, get the first sleep, do like 8,000 damage, then swap to Roilcloud Sword, the Amatsu Water Greatsword, and do more damage on average after that. Or if you can use sleep at first. If you can't, you go to the more flexible Amatsu Greatsword, which does more damage that way. So yeah, options. They're both really, really good, and arguably equally good. They're both better in different situations that depend more on playstyle than matchup. Speaking of matchups though, Elemental Greatsword, which is interesting and basically the main reason I wanted to go through this video. The thing is that because Strongarm Spans is just so strong, the element contribution is relatively so tiny. You aren't going to be doing very much element damage at all if you're just using Strongarm Spans. However, on the other hand, Greatswords actually have really, really high elements. Greatswords in general, their elements that on the weapons are really, really high, and they increase really, really easily. You can also use skills like Charge Master to boost them further. So Elemental Greatsword isn't actually as bad as people might think. If you do more than like 3 attacks between Strongarm Stances, Element Greatsword actually does more damage than raw damage. More elemental builds do more damage than raw builds. So they're actually more equal than you think. If you're playing perfectly and only using Strongarm stance, go full raw, but elemental builds are very viable if you're doing anything less than perfect, which we're probably going to be doing. So yeah, I just think that that's really interesting, and elemental greatsword is surprisingly strong. So yeah, I think there are 3 elemental greatswords that are actually competent. So one is ice. For this one is a thicker blizzard blade, which you get from Aurora, Somnacanth. And yeah, so if you take the condition of just doing 3 attacks, you're doing 8% more damage with this ice greatsword than you are with the Amatsu greatsword. You're doing 8% more damage to the Rajangs, you're doing 5% more damage to Espinas, which is great. You know, we're fitting in all the same really high damage skills, Hellfire Cloak and whatever else. And we have a decent enough element stat, a pretty good element stat. You can also have a good fire greatsword, the Kaktus Kraft. So this guy is pretty interesting because it also has some secret poison, which we can use build-up boost to increase our damage that way. And yeah, this one is really, really strong. 13% extra damage to the Camellios, 12% to Lunagarin, 7% to Volcana, and these are like really important enemies you're going to be fighting a lot. So yeah, fire and poison, pretty good, very comparable to the pure raw builds. And finally, the newest weapon they added, the Silver Sunderer, the Dragon Greatsword, does a full 17% extra damage to Malzeno than the raw builds, which is a lot. Or 6% extra damage to Risen Shigara Megala. And that monster is really, really hard. You are going to be able to do some more glass hits on them. So yeah, like Silver Sunderer as a pseudo-elemental build is actually really good. This honorable mentions Thunder Greatswords. There aren't really any good Thunder Greatswords or monsters that are weak to Thunder. There aren't really any hard ones that are weak to Thunder. I think Thunder Greatsword, the Narwa Greatsword, is optimal against Shogun Senator, but no one's going to have trouble against Shogun Senator after MHG. Other status weapons also do less damage than Nightmare Frilled Blade, the Sleep Greatsword. So technically you can use the Poison, the Lucid Nagakuga Greatsword to do solo damage, but it does less than Nightmare Frilled Blade as a status weapon, and the Roilcloud Sword as a pure raw weapon, so to speak. So yeah, basically just these 3 elements plus the 2 raw options. So yeah, summary conclusions. Roilcloud Sword for pure raw damage per hit, a Nightmare Frilled Blade for massive burst damage. Yeah, I think that's a good way to think of it. Roilcloud Sword for like general continuous damage, Nightmare Frilled Blade, the sleep weapon, for burst damage, huge hits. So yeah, and then it'll really make up for your attacks if you can do your wake-up attack consistently, but it really depends on how you play. Element Greatsword can be competitive if you are unreliable with your Strongarm stance, and by unreliable I mean 3 hits between your Strongarm stances. That's not that bad. So yeah, on screen right now I have the matchup chart. In every other video, the matchup chart is for like optimal play. This is for that less ideal play where you're hitting the enemy 3 times. If you are using only Strongarm stance, everything would be water. It's not going to be a very interesting matchup chart. But yeah, thank you all so much for watching. We'll try and do Sword and Shield over the coming weeks. I do want to do a different, like more pure math video for 3 Blue, 1 Brown Summer of Math Exposition. This is going to be recovering another video idea I had about ELO systems in video games and in chess. So we're going to be talking a lot about ratings and ELO and Glico and other fun things. So yeah, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye. Really useful if a monster has unblockable attacks like a sleep attack or whatever. I have the blue aura right now from Powder Mantle. Attack the enemy.